No, there we go. Now you're good. We're good. We tested it earlier.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think last year we had some evenings where the weather was a little questionable, and this year we certainly have lucked out with a nice evening. So thanks for joining us as we are approaching the Year of Mercy. Father Kevin has graciously agreed to once again join us and teach us a little bit about the Year of Mercy and explore with us about how it connects to our faith plan, our horizon of hope. And I know that in this upcoming year we have so many opportunities to continue to live our lives just so strongly in terms of living a life of joy and mercy to all those we encounter. So thank you, Father Kevin, for joining us, and please help me welcome Father Kevin.
So let's start with prayer. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father in heaven, we ask you to be with us this evening, to open our minds and our hearts to your presence in our lives. We ask you to fill our hearts with the fire of your love, so that we may experience the gifts of faith, hope, and love, the gifts of mercy in our lives, in the lives of our students, in the lives of our parents, in the lives of all we come in contact with. We ask this grace and blessing through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. St. Paul tells us that there are three great gifts: faith, hope, and love. And these three come together in that sense of, our hopefulness, our faithfulness, and our ability to love. But all three of them also have this mercy concept to it, because we all hope that God is merciful. We have faith that God is merciful. And we love the Father in the hopes that he will love us back. So there's this element in there of this mercy and this hope running together. And our problem is sometimes we kind of take the mercy for granted, or we don't quite understand it. And with this extraordinary year of mercy that the Holy Father has called for starting on December the 8th, we have this new way of looking at things. Because it's quite funny how they've changed up certain things to try and reflect what the Holy Father is trying to teach us. And he's not trying to teach anything new, and that's the really cool part. He's just saying it in a different way and putting the emphasis in a different place, right? Up until 1975, the Jubilee door was the primary element around a Jubilee year, okay? And the whole idea is that all those people who would pass through the Jubilee door would receive an indulgence for passing through the Jubilee door. But the Jubilee door itself was this kind of interesting thing. And if you were to go to Rome right now and to look at the Jubilee door, because the only time the Jubilee door is opened is in the year of jubilation, or the Jubilee year, right? Well, in St. Peter's, you kind of, on the outside there's a door, but on the inside it's a bricked wall. And within that bricked wall is a sprinkling of holy water. There are papal coins in there. There are special inscriptions on the bricks and that kind of thing. And the whole idea is the impregnableness. You can't get through it, right? You have to break through it. If you go up to St. Mary's in Calgary, the Jubilee door is as you're walking in the back door, the main entrance of St. Mary's, it's the door to your right, okay? And the only reason you can't get in and out of that door is because we hide the key, right? It's deadbolted and the key is locked up in the safe in the office. But outside of that, it's a door, right? But the whole idea of the Jubilee door was this impregnableness. How do you get through it? How do you get through it? And it would only be knocked down and opened up in this year of jubilation. The Holy Father, of course, is pointing out that that's not quite right. Because this whole sense of jubilation is not supposed to be once in a while, it's supposed to be all the time. And that sense of jubilation should be lived out in our lives daily. And within this context, the mercy of God should be understood. The mercy of God isn't something that comes to us once in a while. The mercy of God isn't something that is reserved for a certain time. The mercy of God is supposed to be there for us at all times. And that's a new emphasis. It's been there all the time, right? You can go to confession 7 days a week. But we don't. But you could. And the mercy of God is offered to you in the sacrament of reconciliation all the time. But do we take advantage of it? Right? Do we think we need it? Do we truly understand what God's mercy means? And here is where the Holy Father is trying to refocus us, get us to rethink in a new way. Every time we pray the Our Father, we talk about, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. But if you look around our world and our society today, how many grudges are being held? You know, how many times do you hear it's like, you know, the animosity towards the Americans, the animosity between Christians and Muslims, the animosity, the hatred, the distrust, all of this kind of thing, and you go, and we all pray the Our Father. Okay? Forgive us as we forgive them. All of a sudden we're forgetting this whole forgiveness and mercy. It is supposed to be part of our everyday life. Most of you are parents, okay? How often do you have to extend mercy to your children? So it's like 47 times a minute, multiplied by how many minutes in the day, etc., 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 right? As teachers, the same kind of thing, right? How often do you show mercy towards your students, right? Whereas it's like, the part about it, you just kind of like to string them up, but, you know, that's not what you're supposed to do, because we're supposed to be loving and caring and merciful. But the challenge is that some days it's difficult. And the Holy Father is trying to remind us that God is merciful, and He is always merciful. And we need to open up this gate of mercy and let the floodwaters of mercy flow out across our world. Because of this animosity, because of this hatred, because of this distrust, because of all of this stuff that's going on, but also because of our sinfulness. You know, I may have told you this before, but it was interesting down in the States, they were doing an interview with one of the cardinals. And they were talking to the cardinal, and the question was, since 80% of Catholics in the latest survey use some form of birth control, will the church change its teaching on birth control? And the cardinal sat there and he pondered for a while, and he pondered for a while, and then he looked at the gentleman and he said, well, I have it on fairly good authority that 95% of Catholics swear. But we're not changing that rule. And I have it on pretty good authority that about 90% of Catholics tell lies. And we're not changing that rule either. So I don't see us changing the rules, but I do see us encouraging forgiveness, encouraging mercy, encouraging understanding. The reality is we break the rules all the time. We're not very good at following. You probably as teachers know this better than I do. It's like, you know, my favorite part about the kindergarten class is, can you get the little children to walk in a straight row, one behind the other? You know, and if at the end of kindergarten they can do that, it was a successful year, you know? And then when they hit grade 7, you have to start all over again because they've lost it. And we struggle. But that's part of our human nature, and it's part of the human condition. We are called to draw ourselves closer to the Father through a sense of love. If you have a class, right, and they don't necessarily have to be the smartest, they don't necessarily have to be the most adept, they don't even have to be the best behaved class, but if they really, really love their teacher, they'll do anything for that teacher. if the kids in the classroom don't like the teacher, you're not going to get a very good response from them. You could be the best of teachers, you could be, have all of the tools and the gifts and the talents and all that kind of stuff, but if the relationship isn't there, something goes astray. The Holy Father is reminding us of the importance of our relationship with the Father in heaven through Jesus Christ. And do we understand the mercy that the Father pours out towards us and into us because he loves us unconditionally? In the same way a mother or father has love for their child, the Father has love for us. And yes, as a parent, you get very, very upset with your child, but you don't stop loving them. But what happens in our relationship with God is this sin separates us from God. And the greater our sins are, the more we think that God will never forgive us. One of the perfect examples is abortion, where we have all kinds of programs here in North America, one of them being Project Rachel, where you deal with someone who has had an abortion, somebody who has been part of an abortion, somebody who has taken somebody to an abortion, somebody who has encouraged an abortion, and they all have these problematics. Because for a lot of women, one of the issues is, at the moment that you had the abortion, it probably seemed like a good idea. But down the road, when you're holding this little baby in your arms, that maybe is yours or maybe somebody else's, and all of a sudden that penny drops, and there is a realization, right? Or maybe you encourage somebody, oh yeah, you know what, I understand, difficult times, things aren't good and that kind of thing, maybe you should do it. And then you're holding a little baby in your arms one day, and you're realizing. And then all of a sudden we have this, it's like, okay, well, where am I with God in this? And do we understand God's mercy and forgiveness? And do we understand God's compassion? And do we understand the fact that God understands all things? And that he is merciful and he is forgiving? And this is one of the challenges that we have, because there are people, it's like, you ask people, well, why don't you go to confession? Why don't you use the sacrament of reconciliation? Well, I don't do anything really bad. Okay, well, that's true enough, right? But when we pray the Confiteor, part of the prayer is of what I have done and what I have failed to do. And 90% of Catholics, it's not what they've done, it's what they didn't do. Right? And this is where part of what the Holy Father is focusing on with this year of mercy. One of the things that strikes me is, and this is something maybe you can have fun with in the classroom, how many of us know what the corporal works of mercy are anymore? We feed the hungry, give to the thirsty, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, right? Visit those in prison, bury the dead. Corporal works of mercy. And the thing is, frequently we do them. Like right now within the schools, you've got that collection for socks, right? Okay? And that is part of the, clothing the naked, okay? Helping those who are destitute, right? It's like that outreaching, okay? But do we connect it to the merciful love of God? That in our actions of collecting socks for people on the street, we are actually living out the mercy of God for God's people. And that act of charity and that act of living out the corporal work of mercy, we are actually being Christ to them and bringing the Father to them. That we are the disciples of Jesus Christ. But frequently what happens is we'll have a jacket collection, we'll have a sock collection, we'll collect food for the hungry, we'll do these things, but do we make the connection to mercy? And do we understand that we are being Jesus Christ to these people? Oftentimes it's like, well, no, we're just doing a good thing. Well, no, this is more than that. This is about mercy. This is about God's love. This is about drawing closer and being Christ to one another. The other side of it is the spiritual works of mercy. The spiritual works of mercy are the ones that I always struggle with myself because I don't remember them all. I get stuck on the first one. Instruct the ignorant. Right? And ignorant, not from the point of view of stupid, but ignorant from the point of view of we just don't know. And it's one of the things that I find really, really hilarious for us as Catholics. All of the stuff that we don't know. Well, why do you do that? We're Catholic. Well, it's an okay answer, but the reality is it's not the depth of the answer. The whole sense of, do you understand yourselves as teachers that every time you stand up in a classroom and you teach the children, you are performing a spiritual work of mercy? And that there is a grace that flows from this. And especially if any time your conversation turns to their relationship to God, that spiritual work of mercy is enhanced. Console the doubtful, right? We have a year of hope coming up. One of the greatest struggles that a lot of our young people have is their lack of hope. They doubt the future. They don't know their purpose. They don't know their direction. They don't know their meaning. They lose hope. And part of our job is to console them in their doubtfulness, in their lack of hope. So just your theme for this year is about mercy. Because you bring hope to those who doubt, those who question. And some of our kids, it's like, they hope they're going to get fed tomorrow. They hope that nobody's going to beat them up tomorrow. They hope for all kinds of different things. But many of them doubt the existence of God because they have so little to hope for. How do we draw that together for them? Comfort the sorrowful. Well, you know what? There's a lot of sorrow in our world. I can walk into a school and I can tell you a lot of the kids that come from broken marriages. Because they're really, really easy to spot after a while. Because they have certain characteristics. And they're very sorrowful. Do you know what it's like talking to a kid in junior high who explains to you that the reason that his parents got divorced is because he wasn't good enough? And how do you unpackage that? And of course, his mom and dad's divorce had nothing to do with him. But he thinks so. And how do we show him mercy? And how do we show him understanding? And how do we help him through that sorrow of the loss and the grief that he's going through? To admonish the sinner. This is the one that we all struggle with. Okay? You're judging me. Excuse me, if I was the judge, you'd be going to hell. I'm not the judge, because you're not going to hell, but I have to correct you. We do have to correct. Right? How many of you know how to put an A or a B or a C or a 9 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10 on a piece of paper? Is that an act of judgment? Or is it a reflection back of knowledge? One of the best lines I ever heard is about the person who gets 100% on an exam. Are they really smart? Or did they just get 100% on what was asked on the exam? Well, think about it. So you knew the material on the exam, but do you really know the stuff? How many of us, when we were going to university, had a professor say, if you want to get an A on this exam, make sure that you have read chapter 33 of your textbook. And then there were the people who didn't read chapter 33 and they couldn't understand why they didn't get a decent mark. Hello, he told you what the material was, right? The fact of the matter was there are 50 chapters in that book, but he focused on one. Do you know all the stuff? I don't know about the rest of you, but sadly this is on tape, but I'll admit it anyway. I would read chapter 33 and not the others. I took the simple route. If he's only going to ask me about chapter 33, I'm going with it. That'll get me my decent mark. The other things will eventually fall into place sometime. At least you pray that that's what's going to happen. I believed in osmosis. If you sleep on the book, eventually something will come to you. But to admonish the sinner is for us to challenge one another in our faith, to encourage one another in our faith, to invite one another to live our faith. It's kind of like, how many Catholics remember that to skip Mass on Sunday is a mortal sin? Right? Okay, now, to miss Mass on Sunday okay, because of. That's a different story, right? But to deliberately skip Mass, not to go, to make that choice, is a mortal sin. The other realm, well, you know what, that one's between you and God because I'm not there, and when you get to stand before Jesus Christ, I will be in the other room down the hall, and I'll have to answer for my own stuff. But the reality is, we don't understand what a mortal sin is anymore. It's really not that bad. Or we play it the situational thing, right? You know, when I was a kid growing up, misbehaving in church was a mortal sin, okay? Nowadays, people celebrate the fact that you're there. You know, Father, just be happy they're there. I don't know about that. I'll get back to you on that later. You know, but the other side of it is how do we encourage each other to live a faithful life? And we do that primarily through mercy. And mercy means I have to challenge you. And part of challenging is to admonish, right? Do you realize that that was a bad choice? I was home not too long ago, and my sister was having great difficulty with her daughter. And so her daughter and I had a little discussion about choices, right? Because she's like, Mommy is always mad at me, right? Hide behind Uncle Kevin because he will protect you from your wicked and crazy mother, right? And of course, I'm there and it's like, no, your mother is not mad at you. Your mother is disappointed in your choices. But since you don't want to be paying attention to your choices, she gets upset. So how do we fix your choices? And for a lot of us, that's the problem. You know, do we know how to make good choices? One of my favorite lines is, a rightly formed moral conscience cannot commit an evil act. I love that line. Except it has a major problem with it. A rightly formed moral conscience. How do you form it? Where does it come from? Where do you get it? Can you buy it at the store? The reality is a rightly formed moral conscience comes from correction. And having people point out better choices, or the flaws within your choices, or how you can improve your choices. One of our great problems in our society today is how our morals and ethics have gone down the tubes. And the reason that they've gone down the tubes is because when most of us were young, the morals and ethics that we were taught were God's morals and ethics. Nowadays, they're not God's morals and ethics, it's now mom and dad's. The downside of it is what happens when the child catches mom or dad telling a lie, saying bad words, and not living the morals and ethics that they are trying to teach them. The first time you catch mom lying to grandma, out goes lying. The first time you catch dad saying a bad word, out goes bad words. And down it goes, and down it goes, and down it goes. And all of a sudden it's like the child doesn't really have any barometer of morals and ethics because they've all been undone. But when you can sit there and you can say, no, these are God's morals and ethics, and yes, I fail. And some days I really screw up, right? I remember as a kid growing up and getting this lecture from my father after having done something, usually, you know, something rather stupid. And, you know, as a kid, what do you throw back, right? The first time my father caught me swearing out in the barnyard, because you couldn't swear in the house, but the barnyard seemed to be okay. And my father came up behind me as I was saying something, and my father just let me have it. And of course, being, you know, a young teenager, what do? You push back. You push back. And it's like, yeah, but Dad, you call the animals this and this and this, and just because it's in German doesn't mean it's not swearing. Because, you know, the only German I know really, really well is the barnyard German, right? And so there I am throwing it back at my father. And my father looks at me and says, yes, I do swear. But God never did. And it's his rule, not mine. And you and I both have to clean up our language. And pray to God your mother never finds out what you said out here. She did. My sister squealed on me. My mother's way of dealing with swearing was castor oil. Come, this'll wash it out. It does. Well, it does a lot of things for you. I understand some of them are good, but I don't know what they are. But the reality is, if we don't correct each other, right, with charity, with love, then what do? We have to show each other mercy, but part of that mercy is that rightly formed moral conscience that gets us to that point where we are aware when we're not measuring up. Like, how can I show you mercy if you don't think you did anything wrong, right? How many of our young people, how many of our adults today go, but it's not my fault, you know? It's somebody else's fault. If so-and-so hadn't done this or so-and-so hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have done this. Well, you know what? Just because everybody else jumped off the bridge doesn't mean you have to jump off the bridge, right? Where does this rightly formed moral conscience come into play? And so, it's got to correct the people, admonish the sinner, correct them, give them the proper direction, help them understand the rights and the wrongs. And where do the rights and wrongs come from? And they come from our Father in heaven. Gladly forgive injuries. I always love that one. Gladly. Are you kidding me? You insulted me and you want me to gladly forgive you? Okay? Well, this is the whole act of charity, the whole act of mercy. Okay? I'm not going to forgive him. Ever had that, the two little boys that got caught fighting in the playground, right? And I'm not going to forgive him. I'm not going to say I'm sorry. He has to say he's sorry first. I'm not going to say, it goes back and forth. Well, they missed the point. You know? And the thing is, it's like, my favorite one is, I told my brother I was sorry, but I really wasn't sorry. But then go back and do it again. Well, I still won't be sorry. Well, keep doing it until you are. Like, how many times do you have to forgive? Not 7 times, but 77 times. And the thing is, what we miss in that is, how come I have to forgive 77 times? Because it takes that long for it to sink in. It's like, let me put it to you this way. This is for the ladies. How often would you like your spouse to say, I love you? And does he ever measure up? Yes, look at him. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. The challenge is like, we like to hear, I love you, a lot. How often do the children want to hear, I love you? Right? And how distressed is a parent when the child hits that age where they don't say it anymore? Right? I had a good friend when I was growing up, and Ronald was really, really funny because as he would leave the house, right? We're in grade 12. You're picking him up, right? And as he leaves the house, he would turn and go, Mom, love you very much. Right? Now guess what? As grade 12s, how do we respond to that?
What are you doing?
What are you doing? It's like, this kind of thing, right? And he'd look at us and go, but I love my mom. Yeah, I know, but you're in grade 12. Don't tell her, keep her dangling, don't let her know, she'll take advantage of it, But we need to do that. And we need to be prepared to do that. And so part of that love comes from this ability to forgive, right? And to gladly forgive. And as much as we need to be told that we are loved, we need to be told that we are forgiven. And we also sometimes have to tell others that we forgive them. Over and over and over and over again until we get it. Because sometimes the worst part about it is, I can forgive somebody else, but can I forgive myself? And in the process of telling them that I forgive them, I work through that forgiveness. Because frequently we know that we're part of the problem. It wasn't just about the other person, it was also about me and what I did. And so, if I'm going to expect mercy, then I have to gladly give mercy. And some days I have to work at it or work up to it so that gladness is actually truly there. Bear wrongs patiently. Have you ever had that thing where it's sort of like you felt really wronged by somebody? right? And you're upset, okay? And then like down the road you find out the whole story, and now you feel like crap because you were so mad at them, or you might have said something to them, and the reality is if you just waited it out, if you just gotten the whole story. One of my all-time favorite ones is where you're trying to help somebody deal with their stuff. Well, he said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said. And my thing is like, okay, but what was the issue? What was the problem in the beginning? Why did you come together, talk to each other, and get upset with each other? What was the initial thing? And the part that's really, really funny is oftentimes there's been so much he said, she said, that they can't remember what they were fighting over in the first place. You know? Because it was something inconsequential, but the emotions that got riled up in and around it become the problem. So sometimes it's like burying the wrongs patiently, because oftentimes what we perceive as a wrong is not a wrong. Sometimes actually what the problem is I'm not paying attention. I'm not doing what I should be doing. And so the thing is, the actual person who is in the wrong is me, not them. I haven't done what I'm supposed to do. So in this one, part of it is also showing mercy to ourselves and working through it ourselves. That awareness, right? I share with you one story, a couple I knew in Calgary, and he had always taken her out for a very, very fancy dinner and for their anniversary. And so their anniversary is coming up, right? And the thing is, they're both very, very busy and all this kind of stuff, right? And every year before, there was roses in the morning, there was a card at lunchtime, there was all of this stuff, right? Okay? And he gets home about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And she is mad. There were no roses that morning. There was no card at lunchtime, right? She comes home, and she got home about 4:30, and there's nothing. There's no roses in the house, there's no card, there's no nothing. And she is livid, absolutely livid with him. He has wronged her, right? And he comes home, and he's like, oh, honey, how are you doing? And this, I'm like, come on, we're going to go out tonight. And she's mad.